And we're live. We're live. Hello, Kenneth. How are you, my friend?
I'm good, Justin. Glad to be here.
Thanks for coming. It's an absolute pleasure, and I just want to say hello to everybody in the chat before we get started. Actually, I'm going to do it from here because it's always better. So we have Patrice. Hello, Patrice. We have Zane from Tarot Token Witchery, and we have a guy named Common Hawthorne. We have Gerald from Tarot Stash, and I'm not sure if the notification went out yet, but I'm sure. And here's Regina. So hello to everybody just coming in, and I hope I didn't miss anybody. But so this is Kenneth from Common Hawthorne, and Kenneth's been around a while. He's somebody I've known for a while. You know, he's had a channel called Common Hawthorne, and I'm very happy to have him on my channel finally. And this is his first live, so that's exciting too. So how's that for you, Kenneth? How is it for your first live?
It's nice to feel so welcome.
Good.
Somebody else also asked me about doing a live, and so to both, as I told Justin, but also to the older person, I feel kind of like a fraud because I consume YouTube at double speed. And so I hardly ever watch lives live. I usually watch them after the fact where I can speed everybody up to speaking double speed.
Yeah.
So
I understand the feeling. I mean, if you sat there and watched every single channel, you would never have any time to do anything else. So
yeah.
I mean, it obviously it's totally understandable, especially somebody who's busy.
Well, but having a live tarot conversation, that is really great, and to be able to do that online. I have a couple of friends that I meet with fairly regularly to just chat, but also to talk tarot. And so the idea, I decided being on a live is just like that. And if
it really is.
It's audience, well, okay, that's fine.
Yeah, it's once you get settled into it, it kind of it starts to just feel very natural. At least for me, it does. Usually, like the first minute is a little jittery for me, but once I get into the conversation, then I'm pretty good. So there's always that stage. I've had stage fright my whole life. Like even I was a musician in high school and even in college, I played jazz band, and I would always get those nerves like before a show. But you know, it was kind of like cold water, like taking a cold shower. It hits you, and then once you get used to it, then you're good. You know. So
Regina asks if it's like an episode of the Chipmunks, and it's funny because some people talk different speeds. In fact, I grew up in California, and maybe 10 years after I had moved to the East Coast, somebody asked my mother if I spoke differently, and she said, well, he talks really fast now. But usually once I listen to somebody for a little bit, speeding them up is not so bad. If somebody has an accent that I'm not familiar with, then sometimes I can't listen to it faster. But
right. Interesting. Yeah. My accent should be pretty familiar to you, right? I think you lived in Philadelphia, didn't you, for a while?
For about 15 years.
Wow. Where did you live in Philly? Anyway, did you live downtown or?
I lived in Camden for a while.
Oh, really?
And cool. I lived in Wayne, which is the kind of the first town on the main line.
Yeah, the main line.
Mostly I lived in West Philadelphia.
Okay. Cool.
So, which was I guess one of the most interesting things about living in West Philadelphia is that it's a very black neighborhood. I mean, Philadelphia itself is a majority black city. Yes. But West Philadelphia, because there are the two universities, University of Pennsylvania and Temple, actually quite a lot of the people who live in West Philadelphia are not African Americans.
Yes. Yeah, they're exactly. Yeah.
who are in this country to go to school. And that was so I always got a tickle out of the fact that it's like, no.
Those homes out there are beautiful, though. The West Philadelphia homes are gigantic. They have those big, like, some of them are 3 stories, and they have those gigantic doorways, and it's really a lot of beautiful homes in West Philly, and particularly like near the university. They're all very old, Victorian style and stuff. But I spent a lot of time in West Philly because I have a friend who lives on 49th Street, and I'm from South Philly, but I'm actually from a little pocket in South Philly, which is like you just cross one bridge and you're in West Philly, basically.
Oh.
It's southwest/West Philly. It's like the very edge of it. So I'm right on the end of the Schuylkill River. You cross the Schuylkill River, you're in West Philly, basically. So I always rode my bike around there, and I spent a lot of time going over that bridge. So, but so how about your channel? So how about we tell people, what prompted you to start a YouTube channel and a little bit about your channel?
So I started watching TarotTube a while before I actually started the channel, of course, and it just seemed like a fun, engaging group of people, like some of the people I started watching. And I've been an early adopter of a lot of online things, and so I'm like really aware of the importance of your namespace. That you need to claim. If you really want a name, you need to claim it, and you need to do it in several locations. And I was really enamored of the idea of the Hawthorn tree as being the folklore being that the fairies live under hawthorn trees. And so, I started looking at all the various ways to have hawthorn or common hawthorn, because they're different kinds. And for instance, my Instagram handle, it's called Common Hawthorne, but it's actually the actual words in the URL are the scientific name of the common hawthorn, and because common hawthorn is gone. And I did, I chose it really being conscious of the fairy connection, both in the pun as a gay man,
yeah,
but also because, not that I believe in fairies, but to the extent that I conceive of kind of an intermediary sort of being,
yeah,
the fairies kind of speak to me. And it's funny because Sinead, I don't know if she uses her name on her channel, Hazel Jane Tarot, who's Irish. She has commented on how much kind of new age spirituality kind of has Victorian fairies, or like sweetness and light fairies, or like, they look like little angels. And she said, but if she sees a fairy circle, she holds her child's hand tight and doesn't let go until they leave it, even though she doesn't believe in fairies. And she said, you never invite fairies into your home.
No.
But I thought about that, and that is part of what attracts me to that idea, is that they are elemental. They're like a tarot deck. There's good and there's ill in a tarot deck. But then I started thinking about, so why, I'm really aware of that, why do I not find them frightening? And I thought, oh, it's because I've known drag queens for 40 years.
That's funny.
And, a glamour, an appearance that may or may not relate to reality, a critique or a different perspective on kind of what's normal. And also, it's like, they'll cut you.
They will. You've got that right. They really will. Well, that's a great parallel, though. That's a really great kind of perspective to see things. You have me thinking now. That's really great. Actually, before we got started, I said I'm going to pull a card for Kenneth, and I have this little OM deck, and so I pulled the Hawthorn. I intentionally pulled this. I didn't randomly pull. That would have been mind blowing, but this is a really cool one. This is by Lunaria Gold, and I don't know if her store is around anymore, but it's called the Irish OM. And I got this on Etsy a while back. But the thing is, a lot of people are kind of iffy with this because the correspondences are a bit different. Her process, according to her, and I haven't studied this enough to know, I kind of just draw them randomly. I thought hers was the prettiest of them all because it's all hand-drawn kind of art. It's very, very beautiful. And it's she has also stones in there as well, like crystals. But she basically went back and really researched it and, connected the correspondence system in her perspective to be more historically accurate. So I don't know enough to know if that's true or not, but I really like it. It's a beautiful deck. So I said, let me pull this for Kenneth. So I put it up here for you.
And the first place that I came across hawthorn trees was in West Philadelphia, where there are some places that they're planted as street trees. And they're the domestic varieties that I've seen have, the kind of oak-shaped leaves, so finely divided. And in the spring have the big clusters, they just sprays of flowers. But the ones on these ornamental hawthorns are white in the center and then like vermilion around the edges of each petal. And they're beautiful. And when you go up close to look at them, and then you find these really rather wicked thorns in the foliage. And I grew up in the desert, and so the whole idea that plants have thorns is deeply familiar to me.
Yep.
So
that's really interesting. I was on a little bit of a kick too with trees, and I was trying to learn the ohm. Actually, what I tried to do was I wanted to carve my own ohm set, and I thought, well, I want to find each of the trees out in nature, and then find a stick, and then carve it in that way. But I got to I found I didn't have to go far to find an ash tree because there's one right out front. It's gigantic, and it's really a beautiful big ash tree. And we have white ash too out this way as well, which are slightly different. They're just they're like a light shade of gray, and they're just huge and beautiful. So I was able to find that. I found an apple tree in the middle of the woods, of all places. We were walking in the middle of the woods, and it's like public property, it's a state game land, but there's this little apple tree there, and it doesn't bear fruit or anything, but it looked like an apple tree. And I have this app, and I took a picture of it, and it searches and it tells you what it is. It said apple tree. So, and just to confirm it, I put a picture of it on Facebook and said, does anybody know if this is an apple tree? I thought, wow, how odd is that in the middle of the forest to find an apple tree? I mean, they grow in the wild, obviously, but somebody said there must have been a homestead there at one time, and maybe that's where it came from, but I have no idea. There weren't any bigger ones around, so maybe somebody threw an apple. I mean, I don't, but it was pretty synchronistic, pretty cool. But I realized as I went on that it was a real challenge to find things like the holly tree. I mean, I would see holly bushes, outside of churches, but the blackthorn is like impossible to find. So I just decided to find one nice wood and then carve all the ohms on that wood,
In the first flush of getting back into tarot fairly seriously, I bought some OM cards and also a rune deck, and then I bought some staves of both runes and OMs, and then realized that I really couldn't. I didn't have the capacity to be delving deeply into tarot and then do those really very realistically.
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
And so I have them, and I enjoy how they look. And I did buy a set that are of Ogham on the Woods
Yeah.
from an Etsy shop in the UK that I like.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I have to find one. I do want to get one, but I experimented a little bit. I made actually even runes with the Ogham on them, and I enjoy doing it myself. But I do want to get an actual set of the corresponding woods, because that would just be really nice, But I totally understand what you mean about dedicating your time to tarot and not being able to really, because Ogham is, I mean, there's not many of them, but it's a bit of, I mean, first off, you have to memorize the names, and the Gaelic names. Then you have to memorize the little symbols. And it's like which side's left, which side's right. And to me, that just it drives my ADD and crazy. It totally just throws me off. So I have not really dedicated a lot of time to learning it. But I say next year is going to be my alternative systems year. So I want to finish this year pretty well with doing tarot. And I will work with tarot next year too, but I want to learn other systems, So I figure Ogham, possibly Lenormand, and there's this tarot deck. Well, we're here to talk about correspondences, so I guess I might as well show you. There's this really cool tarot deck that I have, which I got from Etsy, and this is called Tales of Kenneth, and comes in this really nice kind of bag with a really nice silk lining. Really, really nice, but it's 5 suits. And all the titles, this is, for instance, the High Priestess, all the titles are in Gaelic, which is really cool. It's a really beautiful deck. I mean, the card quality is really nice and everything, but the minors correspond to the Ogham. So you have the little Ogham mark on there. So I thought this is one of the decks that I want to work with next year to really learn it. But it's going to be a challenge, kind of using five suits. But
yeah,
it's really a pretty deck, though. It's based on a graphic novel called Tales of Kenneth, and so that's probably the strangest deck that I have in terms of correspondences. So anyway, we are obviously here to talk about correspondences. So I figure I'll ask you, how do you feel about correspondences in general, tarot correspondences?
The elemental correspondences are really pretty important to me, and that they really shape how I order my decks. There are ways in which some decks are a little harder for me to work with because of the way that they've interpreted or reinterpreted the elemental association. So
Yes.
I think it might be the Tarot of Mystical Moments that which I gave away. I got, but then I gave it away, which uses kind of a visual metaphor for air. So the swords have use sight, and for me that doesn't really click as much as why a sword should feel like cutting the air should make more sense to me than some visual of sight, like eyes or something. But it just doesn't work for me because the association with the element isn't as good. And you had asked about what decks I've been using lately, and so one of them that I'll go ahead and show now is kind of an unusual deck. It's the Occultati.
Oh, Stephen Bright told me about that deck.
I learned about it from a video that Tom Benjamin did, and they're really big.
Let me.
But the majors are. The majors are black and white. Oh.
I'm just trying to. I can never get this. There we go.
Oh, okay.
I was trying to make you bigger, but I'm like an old lady here. I can never figure this out. So go ahead, continue.
Yeah, the majors are black and white. Here's the Hanged Man.
That is absolutely beautiful.
It's I got it in part because of wanting kind of male identified decks, and also the fact that when I show you some of the minors, you'll see that they kind of have a not entirely human. I'm trying. Oh, here's Justice. Even the female figures are fairly masculine, in my opinion. Oh, come on, where's... Keep looking for a cup. There we go. So the cups use this blue color.
Wow.
And the pinnacles use this green color, which makes sense to me. So here, for instance, is more figures that are, it's like, they're humanoid, but I mean, that's not really humans.
It looks like a fairy deck.
Yeah, it does kind of feel like a fairy deck to me. And
so beautiful.
So there's a wand.
So is she asking what deck this is? It's called Oculati, or?
Yes, it's Occultati.
Oh, Occultati, yeah.
And it's by this guy. His name I will not try to pronounce because those L's with the slashes are not actually L's. So, and just more information for anybody who might be searching.
Where was that? France was that from, or?
He's Polish.
Okay.
The artist is Polish. Yeah, it was published by Scarlet Imprint on 11th August 2018. There are 900 hand-numbered decks. So this was deck number 706, and I got it maybe a year and a half ago. But anyway, the swords are this pink color. I'm sort of like, okay. But you know, in terms of elemental correspondences, I'm used to a more typical thing being the air being yellow and fire or wands would be, you know, red instead of that earthy yellow. So that's one of the kind of just curiosities. Oh, thank you, Macomar.
Yeah, Ishi has placed the link down in the chat there, so that's great. Thank you, Ishi. Yeah, that's a beautiful deck. I almost bought it. Steven had told me about it when I interviewed him, and I looked, and I was like, at the time I was trying to watch what I was spending, and I knew it was a bit on the pricey end. So I was like, well, it's really a beautiful deck, so I'm going to sit on it. And now you're bringing it up again, and I totally forgot about it. So I'll probably be snooping around tonight looking at it.
Well, I didn't use it for the longest time because I was afraid that, and I think that Tom makes this comment in his video about being afraid that if he got it out of order, he wouldn't be able to tell which cards were which.
Yeah.
Because none of them are labeled.
Yeah.
But actually on the website, there's a full set of images of all the cards in order. So if I get too confused, one of the wands is, it's a little hard to count how many wands there are. And, but once I got used to it, I thought, okay, I'll go ahead and shuffle it. And it's kind of uncomfortable to shuffle, but maybe, I don't know, 3 or 4 months ago, I just felt it calling to be used a little more because it's a big deck. I mean, it's not just physically big. Like I can, I'm 6'2" and my hands aren't small, and I can barely riffle shuffle it if I'm really, really careful.
Oh, okay.
And it's thick enough that even overhand shuffling, it's a deck that requires time, and then the images are so strong that it feels like it's a big deck. It's not a pull it out and sling a couple cards deck for me.
Yeah. No, I get that. I used to be one of those people that didn't riffle shuffle, but now I actually do. Especially when you get a new deck, it's just a lot easier than sitting there shuffling for an hour. You just do 7 riffle shuffles, and then you shuffle it a few times, and it's ready to go. But bigger decks, like Lake Tarot Noir, for instance, I can't riffle shuffle that, and I just overhand it. But I've done other ways of shuffling too. But I feel like with a deck like that, because I feel like this Tales of Aneth is very much that way. It's really hard to recognize what the images are, like which pips are which and so forth. Especially this deck is in Gaelic, which I don't speak Gaelic. But I think there's a benefit, kind of like long term. I feel like it's a double-edged sword. Like if you do get to know the deck really well, it sort of forces you to kind of get to know it better. You know what I mean? It's like not being able to spot them sort of makes you more familiar with each card, I feel like, in a way. Do you feel like that? Or?
You have to actually interact with the card that's right in front of you rather than some idea. It's like, oh, it's the 5 of Swords. Well, no, if you have to actually really look at the card and figure out what's going on in the card in order to know that it's the 5 of Swords, you do engage with it differently.
Definitely.
There's still whatever kind of meta meaning you give to the 5 of Swords, of course, is there, but you have to get to it through the card rather than immediately going 5 of Swords and then looking at the photo or the image. A similar deck that I have never worked with because it's just going to take so much work is the Tildwick.
Oh yeah. Oh
God.
Because
it's I don't know, my old eyes. If I look at a card, I have to take off my glasses and really peer at the card to be able to see what's in it, to see what's in that image.
I bought it because of I feel like I caved into the hype of it, but when I first looked through it, I was like, oh man, it's kind of busy and just blurry, and I just didn't really get it. But I feel like there's a little more to that deck that I just haven't really tapped into yet.
Yeah.
Hello, Ben, walking in, and Jonathan makes an interesting point. He says bigger decks he riffle shuffles sideways, and that is true. I never do that myself, but people do that sometimes. So that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I've tried that with the oculi occultati, or holding them by the sides and kind of riffle shuffling just the corner. So, yeah, the second edition, Jonathan, the second edition is different, although I think it's actually a little easier to read.
Yeah,
so
please.
Oh, just about the correspondences. So, like, I really started thinking about elements back when Starhawk was writing some of her first books, and I've never participated in any covens or anything, or I've never considered myself practicing witch, but in that reclaiming, it's now, it's come to be called the reclaiming tradition. You cast a circle starting either in the north or in the east. And for me, in terms of how I kind of relate to the elements beyond tarot, I start with the north. And so I always, if I'm resetting a deck, I do the trumps, which I think of as a spirit element, but then I do pentacles, swords, wands, and cups in the earth, air, fire, and water, which, if I'm going to talk about the elements, I would just tend to put them in that order. When I say what are the four elements, earth, air, fire, water, that's how I think of them. And so that's how I order my decks if I'm resetting a deck. And I know that other people, like, decks hardly ever come in that order when you buy them. And other people have very firm ideas about a different order, which I can't even remember because I just disregard.
I was just thinking of that. I was like, it's not really important to me, but I definitely do fire, water, air, earth. I do fire, water, air, earth when I, if I'm ordering a deck. But I mean, I don't feel strongly about that. To me, whatever floats your boat, I guess, with that. It doesn't even seem important really to me, But I do, I do buy into the, swords are air, cups are water, and pentacles are earth. For me, that's the system that I think it's because it was the first, and even that I don't. For me, I think correspondences, they're very important, but I don't think the particular system that you use is as important, more than if you actually, like, I think the only thing that's important is that you personally accept it. And if you accept it, then that gives it a chance to be meaningful and to produce, like, synchronicities. I feel like, because anything you put meaning into, your whole entire understanding of the world is based on your own, perception of whatever you're perceiving. So, and I think the meaning that you put into it is important. So if somebody uses Kabbalah, I think that their readings can be just as good as somebody who might use, like, Pythagorean numerology. As long as you accept that information and you put meaning into it, it's personally meaningful for you, then I think it will produce these meaningful coincidences, And so that's my outlook.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I agree. And what I found is that the tarot has not thus far proven to be an effective way to add correspondences. For instance, I don't really, I don't follow or use astrology or Kabbalah. And so when people, like, the idea that I might use the tarot and then add Kabbalah to it doesn't really work for me. Like numerology, it's like I'm not heavily into numerology, and yet I think we just absorb a variety of numerological significances. You know, like 1 is a unity, and 4 is stable, and 3s are stable in a different way, and that some of those or you know, the whole idea that odd numbers and even numbers are different, or that prime numbers are, you know, or multiple, like 9 is 3 threes, and that those kinds of number games are something that is familiar before. I don't even have to look at tarot to have some familiarity with that. And likewise with the elemental correspondences, because they meant something to me before delving into tarot, then it becomes really easy to make it fit.
Yes, I agree.
But like then taking tarot and trying to add other correspondences that I'm not already familiar with has thus far not really done much to like deepen my my tarot.
Yes, I hear what you're saying, for sure.
I'm getting distracted by the comments.
No, I know. I was reading them too. They're talking about The Craft here, the movie The Craft, which I've never even seen. I've still have not seen that movie. See, Jonathan,
the idea of Earth is the foundation we stand on. That I think is also part of my. Well, you know, another correspondence is seasons. That there are tarot decks that assign seasons to the cards, and I tend to go with the north. That Pentacles and Earth is the north, and I tend to think of that as a winter, and so I follow around in order of the seasons, which there are other ways to assign seasons to the suits, but like you said, it's what's the lens we're using individually, and do we apply that lens to the tool that we're using, and do we do it consistently? And so, you know, is there any particular reason why swords should be spring? Because a lot of people think that wands are spring, and but I'm like, oh no, wands are fire. And that's south. That's totally summer.
Yeah, you know, that's something that I've never really thought much about, was the seasons. I mean, I had, you know, when I was first learning tarot, it was there, and I suspect I probably embraced the Golden Dawn. I thought north was winter and south was summer. West was, what was it? West was fall and east was spring. Is that what I used to do? I don't even remember, to be honest with you.
That would be the way I would match them up.
But now, an interesting thing, Rachel Pollack once told me, you know, she said, you know, once you apply those correspondences, how do you use it in a reading? That's basically what she said with astrology. She was talking about astrology. She was like, okay, she doesn't, you know, she writes about it in her books and talks a lot about it, you know, especially when she's writing, but she doesn't use it in a reading, almost never, you know, because it's not really useful for her personally, you know. So, and I always thought that was really interesting. Gerald says he starts in the east. Let's see. Jonathan is wands, cups, swords, pentacles. And that's just how you learn them. Yeah, I agree. I mean, like, I don't really put that much into that either. Yeah, you know, I think I will use astrological correspondences when picking a significator. And I use it more when court cards, you know, like if a court card comes up in a reading, I tend to think, you know, like if you get the Knight of Wands, I tend to think, you know, fire energy, you know, somebody, Leo, Sagittarius, Aries, young male, you know, if we're talking about individual person. So sometimes I will use that more in picking a significator, but you got to be careful with that too, because it's like, you know, you're generalizing, and then a lot of times it's like, oh no, that person, you know, they're a Pisces, they're not a Leo. Well, what's the rising sign? I mean, like you could do that whole game, but I would just say occasionally, like if it comes out once in a while, but I don't think it's that important. I think for me, it's more about just seeing what the card's saying in the reading, and you know, if it comes up, it comes up, but very rarely does it come up. You know, the astrological thing.
Yeah, because I don't use astrology, I hardly ever use that, and the whole age thing or gender. You know, the whole, oh, the Queen of Cups is a blonde woman or whatever it is. I'm like, not totally not doing that.
The old fortune telling way. That's.
But I find that I frequently do identify with a specific court card myself, and in conversations with some friends, you know, have talked about what court cards I see them as, or that they see themselves as. But one of the correspondences that I'm curious about, not so much for divination, but just because thinking about systems helps me explore the implications of the systems more deeply, is that Myers-Briggs type indicator is something that I've, you know, it's been discredited, fine, whatever. But I have actually found it useful in the context of relationship with other people to think about, well, there really are introverts and there really are extroverts, and there really are people who look at the trees and people who look at the forest, and there are people who like to evaluate things based on like the rules, and people who like to evaluate based on how it affects other people. And there are people who like to come to a conclusion, and there are people who want to keep gathering data, which is, that's my basic assessment of the 4 letters or the 8 letters. But thinking about whether those 16 types, do those 16 types map in any way to the 16 court cards? And, you know, they do and they don't, or, you know, you could make a case for all sorts of different ways to mapping them. But thinking about those 2 systems, and even if I never actually succeed in mapping them, thinking about how I might map them both enriches my sense of what the court cards are like, and it enriches my sense of what Myers-Briggs is like. I mean, it's the same way with the whole, I'm intrigued by the idea that the courts could be like water of water, or fire of water, and earth of water, and air of water.
Yes.
And I get confused about, so which direction are we going, and what does it mean to be air of water rather than water of air? I mean, that, it seems like a mystery.
True. No, I get what you're saying. I totally get that. It could be very confusing. I think I do that. I have a tendency to do that with, you know, with some of the core cards in a reading, you know, like queens or water of water. So that's an easy one, you know. So what do you view a page as earth or a page as air? And do you, if either, like, I know some people look at kings as earth and pages as air, you know, it's always kind of interchangeable, really.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to think of kings being the earth, and queens as water. I mean, queens as water and knights as fire.
Yes.
Seem to be, you know, relatively agreed on, but the earth and air part for kings and pages, you know, I can see either one.
Me too. Definitely. Because, yeah, if you look at the page as a learner, that's very much air, like the idea of that they're learning, they're seeking knowledge and information, then that's air, and then a king, of course, could be, like a master of thinking and but also could be very earthy too. So definitely. I think it's probably interchangeable for me. I think it would depend on the situation. You know what I mean? And whatever I was feeling at that moment. I think I look at pages as earth and kings as air, just because that's the way I was sort of taught, But I think I see both. So, but it's interesting because like correspondences are never perfect. And I was reading earlier about the first people. You had what was his name, Giblan, and then Malay. And so both of them, I was reading about it in Robert M. Place's book, and I think he was talking about Malay. So Giblan was the guy who he saw Egypt in the cards. He was the first person to kind of, he saw there was a story about, and it was the Book of Thoth from Egypt, is what he said. And then Malay expanded on that, but he also drew like a loose connection with Hebrew letters, but didn't really elaborate on that. But Robert was talking about in his book how there were whole things he would talk about, connections, and then he would totally just ignore and just skip over the parts that didn't fit. And that was the whole thing about the debate with the fool. It's like, where does the fool go? Today, most of us, we look at the fool as like the beginning of the tarot journey, the fool's journey. That was Ian Gray. But that was a point of like big contention, because it was like, well, the fool didn't really fit at the beginning, didn't fit at the end. Waite, actually, in his book, Pictorial Key, said that the fool actually fits best in between judgment and the world. But he numbered it 0, so that's an indication that it's a beginning. But he kind of still said, well, it should be, between judgment and the world. So it's like, he's not even sure, and it's just, it was very interesting, but people get really contentious about that kind of thing. I mean, especially when you're dealing with the people who are affiliated with the Golden Dawn and all these, Thoth readers and people like that are very, into their systems. And, I was never very ideological with that kind of thing, but it's just, there's always going to be imperfections, and nothing's ever going to fit 100%. You're always going to have those areas where it just doesn't work,
Yeah.
Sometimes it works really well. So,
and like your original thought that we might do our like tarot profile using the numerological,
yeah,
birth card and year card and all of that. And I said, nope, non-starter.
I know.
Because I immediately start thinking, well, Julian calendar or Gregorian calendar? Or, well, what if I'm Jewish? Would we use a Jewish calendar? Or, again, it's like the things that work for us as individuals work for us.
Yeah.
And other things just don't as much. And that it's not that they're wrong, but it's like, are the correspondences, well, or like I said, it's like, does whatever I'm trying to make the tarot correspond to already make sense to me?
Yeah.
Definitely. And if it makes sense to me, well, then it's easy to maybe apply it to the tarot. Yeah. Or apply the tarot to it and enrich my understanding of both. But
yeah, Stephen makes a good point. That's the old Italian saying, like the fool of the tarot, here, there, and everywhere. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a good point. And the one thing about studying tarot history, like learning about the game of tarot, it was very helpful for the fool, because the fool was a pass card. That's what the Fool was basically, the get out of jail free card. It was unnumbered, and in the game of Triumphi, it was like a pass card. You could play it wherever you wanted to. And so to me, that's sort of the nature of the Fool, even in tarot. You know, it's like how it was used in the game. So that's sort of carried over in that. And I don't think that's intentional. I think that's very synchronistic, actually, the way that happened. Maybe it's the archetype of the Fool manifesting.
Well, the cards that, well, so a mathematical argument could be made for what I'm about. A mathematical argument for using 0 could be made for what I'm about to say. But, you know, there are decks that don't number it.
Yes.
Like, rather than not numbering death out of a superstition about 13, there are decks that don't number the Fool because the Fool can lay anywhere. And, you know, I think that there's certain ways that the roles that 0 plays in mathematics that is similar to that. It's like, you know, you can't divide by 0.
Yeah. Yeah. So actually, I think it was somebody said it. I don't know if it was Levi. I think it was Levi said that the 0 actually it times the value of the other cards by 100. So, which was kind of odd. I read that today, actually. But this is a deck here. I don't know, have you ever heard of this Tarot Balby?
No.
This is a vintage deck from the 70s. I think probably like the late 70s. It's Fournier. But it's based on the, what's his name? Hugues Picard. It's based on that system. And I believe here, well, in this one, so the Fool is marked 0. And it has the Hebrew letters and everything. But the World is number 22. So it goes Judgment 20. And then it skips 21 and goes to the World. But I think that's an indication that even though this is a 0 value card, it still goes in between Judgment and the World, which is very strange to me. But some people number the Fool 22. Some people number it 0. So, I mean, there's all sorts. And this is one of those decks, too. I mean, talk about correspondences. You know, the swords are, again, the element of water. Like you'll see in the Hugues Picard deck, you know, same thing. Cups are. Well, this actually looks like earth to me, but to me that looks very earthy. But I believe it's supposed to be air in this. Yeah, it's a quirky little deck. I almost never use it, but it's a collection piece. You know, I like having it because it's a historic deck, and it's fun to look at when you're talking about things like the Fool. This is actually the Hugues Picard deck, though. This one, and this is Noria Brownfield, who also produces the Tower of the Holy Light, I believe. And just show you this very quickly. So that's the swords. Very, very watery. You know what I mean? Well, for me, I actually can use this deck with no problem because, like, the cards just, it's so obvious that it's water. So the sword in the card doesn't really play much importance. For me, it's the element and then the shape, you know? Do you think you could read with something like this, or would this be too distracting for you?
Yeah, I would find that a very distracting deck.
Interesting. Yeah, kind of like it.
I mean, there are even decks like, I think it's the Numinous Tarot, another deck that I had and gave away. Where like the air is bells. I think that that's what they are. And of course, no longer have the deck, so I can't check. And then the Brady Tarot also uses different. I mean, and Numinous Tarot and the Brady Tarot don't switch like swords from air to water. It's just that they've switched the physical representation for air or for. So I think in so like the Brady Tarot, it's feathers for air.
Yes.
And arrows for. Is that right?
I believe the arrows in the Brady, if I'm remember, it's been about a year since I picked it up, but I think the arrows are actually fire. I thought the arrow were fire.
Yeah,
if I'm not mistaken. I have the deck right here. I could grab it,
but obviously I don't use that deck all that much.
I love it. I think I have a special affinity to that deck, but it's been a while since I picked it up. Usually if I go up the mountains, I take it with me.
Mm-hmm.
Because of all the American animals. So
yeah,
I feel very connected to it like then.
There's specific images that are incredibly powerful for me in the Brady.
Yeah,
Tarot.
the owl, especially the owl for me.
Oh yeah.
The owl is great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the bells, it's a German system. And I think that it's Earth is the bells. Well, at least in the playing card kind of correspondence. If I can do this correctly. I was just looking at this is Stuart Kaplan, but you see the bell there.
Hmm.
You know, and it fits in with the pentacles and the earth. That's what they have it listed here, but you know, again, like it's like whatever the local tradition is and how they've accepted it. You know, in magic, I think is another thing that they do. They switched them. You know, like in the magic tradition, it was swords were fire. So you know, and wands were air.
So Mystic Rose, this is the.
Yeah.
It's the Brady.
It's beautiful. I love that Brady Tarot.
I think feathers must be wands.
Is that the second edition that you have there?
Yeah, Kenneth? The second edition.
Oh yeah, look at that. That's right. I just read a cool book on owls and synchronicity and UFO sightings. It sounds like a crazy book, but it was a brilliant book. I think it's called Owls, UFOs, and Synchronicity is the title of it.
Oh, and here's the owl.
Yeah.
I'll see if I can find my favorite one quick here. The court cards don't make quite as much sense to me. In this, and I know some people don't really like the the death card is really pretty wonderful.
Oh yeah.
So there's the, you know, down here is some sort of dinosaur or something, and then there's a extinct saber-toothed tiger, and then there's a human. So it's kind of like the agelessness of.
Yeah. I always wanted the first edition because of the box, but I kind of like the card stock of the second.
Yeah, the card I had the first edition and I gave it to a friend. The box was a little unwieldy,
Yeah.
So the thing I love about this is that the possum has not actually been pierced by any of the arrows. The two that right here, it's actually holding them. So that's a way in which it kind of turns the Ten of Swords on its head.
Interesting.
Yeah,
I never
Christine.
noticed that before. I
Yep.
never knew that. Yeah, he's playing dead, Kristen. Yeah. Yeah, I think they're what in like the 5th edition now. Ben's saying he wants to. Ben
Oh
from
yeah,
Benfica.
it could be. And yeah, in spite of the fact that the Ten of Swords, the possum is playing dead, it is quite a dark deck. Or I've been trying to actually not use that metaphor. It's a deck that does not shy away from death and suffering. So there are, even though that card doesn't, unlike Rider-Waite Smith decks with the dead person, presumably dead with the pool of blood and the 10 swords in his back, that 10 of Swords doesn't show a dead possum, but there are other cards that show dead or about to be eaten or very, very sick animals. So it's does not shy away from that, the Brady Tarot.
No, and that's one of the few animal tarot decks that I actually like. You know, like I do like the Crow Tarot and things like that. But I don't dislike animal decks. I just don't usually connect with them so well. But that one, I think Rachel wrote the book, which was great, and I really loved. I mean, that when I first read that, when I backed it on Kickstarter, and I got it, I read it, and I remember reading the whole little booklet at one time and really enjoying it because it really just made a lot of sense, and so that helped. But I thought that Emmy Brady did just a really good job at identifying the animals, and like really like she just really knows the animal very well, and it wasn't an easy thing to do. First off, it was all North American animals from all over North America, and it just seems she was very into the connection. She really knew them very well, and that's how I think of that deck. I think of that as a very American deck, wildlife and having an affinity with nature. That's really why I liked it.
So another deck that I pulled out because you said you wanted to see what I was working with.
Yeah.
There's a segue here. Is the Prairie Majesty Oracle.
Oh well, okay.
So it's plants and animals. Oh, I pulled from the wrong side. I thought, I'm showing another card, but I wasn't. So, it's an abstract drawing, but they identify right on the card what it is, and there's a question to think about. And the little white book is quite nice. There's a keyword that goes along with it. There are 4 cards that you can kind of define how you want, day or sun or whatever.
Yeah. What is that called again, Kenneth?
It's the Prairie Majesty Oracle.
That's pretty cool. Okay.
It's new.
Amy from Mystic Rose says, always something to learn from the dark and light, like the Hush Tarot.
Yeah, to be specific, what because I'm an editor, and I'm trying to I'm trying to find better ways of describing negative or unpleasant things than defaulting to dark and light because of the racial implications of that. And, it's difficult. But I have a colleague who's gone on to bigger and better things, who said in his experience as a Black man, that in his experience that like Black churches did not actually use phrases that talk about light in the same way that white churches do. And so I took that to heart when somebody I actually know said, no, it actually does make a difference. And I prefer not to use black or dark, like the Dark Knight Journey. I mean, that's classic. I'm a religion editor. So, the Dark Knight Journey, classic, centuries old phrase for something that's real. And, trying to figure out how to work around that.
Especially in editing, when you're publishing things, it certainly would be more important, because it's a big, you're dealing with a big audience,
Yeah. I mean, we're also trying to, and we've actually gone a little bit farther on this, learned a little bit better of metaphors that use ableist, we had a program that was called Standing on the Side of Love, and a number of members who use wheelchairs said that they felt excluded by that, and there were all sorts of arguments about whether the fact that it was a metaphor made a difference, and in the end we changed the name of the program. And so there are similar things about just where does metaphor enrich our lives and where does it perhaps exclude people. And it's like conversations about the gendered nature of the tarot and that people are having. It's like, well, tarot cards are metaphors, and does the visual depiction actually, the visual depiction does affect how we experience the card. And so
when I talk about gender and tarot, and I do often, but I think of it more as general duality. I don't think of because I believe in masculine and feminine energy, but I don't believe that you have to be a man to embrace either one, or a woman to embrace feminine energy. Like for me, it's just basic. But like you were talking about metaphor, and this is something obviously I learn every day, and I'm constantly evolving like everybody else. But when I do use those terms in tarot, like even with the court cards, doesn't necessarily mean it's a man or a woman. It's just kind of how I've learned how to associate that energy that represents it, if that makes sense. I don't know if that does or not, but like there's that aggressive kind of, like I think of the sun and moon really are the best kind of example of that kind of energies, like the reflective kind of nature of the sun, of the moon, and then the forceful, aggressive nature of the sun. And that's more or less what I think of. I don't think of like man and woman really.
Of course, if you weren't Western European, or if you had a different Western European background, you'd switch the genders of the sun and the moon.
True. Very true. Yeah.
Even that is like,
yeah.
Well, I hear you, Mystic Rose. I was thinking about whether you meant that that there's something to learn from the dark, and that's what I wanted to make clear. It's like, I totally think that there's something to learn from the Death card and the Tower card and the cards about conflict or need or whatever.
Yeah.
That it's only because words are my craft.
Yes.
And that that is a difference between a visual art and a word-based art. Is yeah, I mean, there are pictures that are literally dark, and
Yeah.
you know, like nighttime is dark.
Yeah. Very true. Well, that's I think a very big point. You know, that's your craft. You know, you're into the art. You're into art with words, and so words are very, very important in that respect. You know.
Yeah.
So I totally get it. You know. How about you know, because we're very close to 5:20. I'm very conscious of. We could probably just wrap up right after this. But how about like a card for the year, or like you know, any type of? Do you have like a system where you pick a card for the year, or a life path card, or any of that?
Nope.
Okay.
Occasionally, when it's not just like cross quarter days or the equinoxes or solstices, but there are days that I decide are kind of significant and that either end or begin some cycle or period of time, and I'll tend to just draw a random card. Just recently, someone on Instagram posted about something they were doing to try to get kind of back in the swing of a daily poll, which I've actually been struggling with. And so once I did what they did, which was to, she suggested actually journaling it out, but she said, so think about how does my mind feel? How does my heart feel? How does my body feel right now? To answer those questions and then to go through the deck face up and pick the card that you think reflects how you feel right now, or where you are right now. And then to shuffle the deck and draw a card as usual without looking, not choosing one, but just drawing a card and reflecting on how those two cards, the one you chose consciously and the one you drew from the deck, how they complement or contradict or support, or does the card the deck gave you provide commentary on the one that you consciously picked? So I'm much more likely to do that, to actually go through and select a specific card based on the occasion, rather than the year thing. Because as I said, it's like the whole numerology of reducing the year to its constituent, or to its basic number. It's just like, it just doesn't work for me.
I wonder, for me, I just reading Mary Greer's book, well, Tarot Constellations and the Tarot for Yourself, where she explains it. I don't even think it's her system. I think she might have got it from Wold Amberstone or somebody like that. But I could be wrong about the Wold Amberstone, but I believe she borrowed it from somewhere else. But the card for the year, and then your life card, your soul, and your personality card. I just feel like mine works so well for me, and I wonder if that's why I just love the system, because I do my, like, for instance, this is a death year for me, and I mean, in so many ways it was. And now next year is obviously temperance for me. And I feel like, I'm already thinking about alternative systems, and, just with tarot practice alone, I'm thinking about learning other systems, and, changing it up a bit. And I just need to think of temperance, like that kind of year. It just works for me. I don't know why, but it seems to really work well.
clearly works for a lot of people, but
Yeah.
like I bought Mary Greer's Tarot for Yourself, probably 30 years ago, and ran right smack head on into that chapter and never got past it. And then when I re-entered tarot study, I bought the most recent version, and once again got up to that place and was just like, it's just
Yeah.
no.
All right. I get it.
And it's always so funny when there are things that work for everybody else, but they don't work for you, and it's like, well, okay, because there are plenty of other things to do.
True. Very true. Well, it could also be, like I said, I mean, when you put meaning in something, and if you're not putting meaning in something, then it's obviously not going to work. So, it could just be that whole thing too.
Yeah.
But anyway, Kenneth, this was really, really nice. I really appreciate you coming on. I know you have a lot to do today, and yeah, we totally had fun. There was something I just wanted to say thank you for, because it was probably last year or something. I was kind of almost quit YouTube at one point. I just really wasn't. It took me forever to like break 100 subscribers. I feel like at that time, and it was a kind of a weird point in my like tarot tube experiment, which it was at the time. And I remember you did a thing where you did a tag and you said channels that you would like to see people grow, and you named my channel. And I was like, I think I might have had maybe like just a couple subscribers, and that doesn't even matter. But it's just the point that when somebody says something nice in a time that I was feeling like kind of like I wanted to quit and I wanted to move on, it meant a lot to me, and I've always thought of you because of that, and that's why I'm glad I was able to have you on today.
Oh.
And, so I appreciate you. You're a good person. It means a lot to me, and I never forgot that. So thank you.
You certainly have gone on to grow your channel. I really like the things that you're doing, and you try new things and you're taking risks, and it's really great to see. So I'm
thank you.
Played a small part in that.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And I always think of you and James Feeney. Both of you always gave me really nice compliments and mentioned me on your channels and so forth. And I feel like shortly after that, I just started trying different things and just doing what I wanted, not really caring about like being the most liked or most popular. I just kind of wanted to do what I wanted to do, and I'm on this journey. But I appreciate you for doing that. I really do. And I'm glad you came on today.
Thanks.
And thanks everybody for stopping by, and really appreciate it. And until next time, hang in just 1 second. Until next time, everybody, love and peace.